All right, we're here back on Dr. D's social network, this time with Olga Koppel. Olga, how are you?
Hi, nice to speak to you. I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. We talked a while ago off
Yeah.
air, and I learned some interesting stuff about you. Like,
Hello, me.
outside of your research, we talked about some stuff. You
Right.
may not.
Yeah, we did. But I heard you also learned some cool stuff about bees, so I'd love to
I,
hear.
well, it's just my daughter has this like big fear of bees, and she's 10, but then I started explaining to her like the importance of bees, and so we were outside and we were watching kind of this bee like pollinate the flower and stuff, and then like the fear went away from her as she like understood one part of what a bee does. And so we were right next to this bee and watching it. It was a beautiful sunny day, and I said, I'm going to be talking to a lady about bees. And she's like, oh, you have to tell me what she says.
Aw, get her on, let her ask some
I
questions.
know she's at school right now learning about stuff, but
Fair enough.
your area of research fascinates me. I think bees are more important than we think they are. So give me some background into your motivation for getting into this version of research.
Sure. So I'm a conservation biologist and a PhD candidate right now, and I am studying how bees interact with the climate and the way that we choose to use land, and how all of that affects how our pollinators are surviving and thriving or not around
Hmm.
us. So I got into this similarly to the way that your daughter is like starting to get interested about the natural world. In my experience, the more closely you look at nature, the more you will discover and the more questions you'll have. And I'm never left disappointed when I just stop and look around at like my back garden or just the plants along the street when I'm walking. It's just like reminds you that everything is connected around you. Everything is working, in its own way. And there's just so much more to learn. And it's not scary, like your daughter noticed as
It's
well.
not scary. It's not scary. So let's take it from a very basic level and then get really specific. So the importance of bees in the world. Start there. What's kind of the basic level information we should know?
All right. Bees are one of our biggest pollinators of all the flowering plants around the world. So this includes the wildflowers that you see anywhere, but this also includes our fruit and vegetables. So without bees, very little fruit and veg. Without bees, forget cotton that's used to make the denim that we wear, right? Bees are super important pollinators of those things. Even dairy cows eat plants pollinated by bees. So, on a basic level, over 80% of like plants around the world are pollinated by these bees, and they're super important to us.
Wow, that's quite a bit of things that I don't think most people know that about it. What is their kind of their culture? Let's talk about bee culture. How do bees behave in their culture? What's kind of their whole societal aspects of bees?
That's a really good question because it is, like you said, a society. There's a
Mhm.
huge organizational structure and hierarchy. I focus on bumblebees, so I'll tell you about that, how their life goes. Um, Bumblebees, the colony is started by a single queen bee that was already had her eggs fertilized the fall before. She's been sleeping all winter in like underground or in some kind of sheltered place. She's been hibernating. In the spring, this one queen bee wakes up and she's hungry. She immediately needs to find some flowers, some pollen, some nectar to feed herself and also to feed her fertilized eggs that are, she has to lay somewhere and then feed all by herself.
How long is this hibernation, by the way? I didn't know that this happened.
Yeah, for bumblebees, the queen bee hibernates the whole winter. So maybe
Oh,
somewhere in September, October, when you can imagine all the flowering plants dying off, she's got no more food to eat, and so it's time for her to go hibernate.
hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. I just hibernation. I'm not sure that we see hibernation as a like a bumblebee thing. We think about like bears. and things like,
Yeah.
kind of like this slumber, this hibernation. So they go underground, like, okay, underground, like, I mean, it sounds dumb, like where? Like underground, like what's their area?
That's actually a great question because if we knew that, we would know a lot more about bee conservation. It's super hard to find because it's just a single bee, right? And
Yeah.
she'll find like any cavity she can. If there's an abandoned nest from a rodent, she might go in there, or under a pile of like logs or leaves in the forest, or just in a small cavity underground, anywhere she can find. Yeah.
Wow. That's that's crazy, actually. I had no clue. So they come out of hibernation. Take me through that process.
All right, so the queen bee's out, her metabolism is up, she's hungry, she's flying around. She needs to find some flowers to get her food, and then she needs to find like a really nice spot to lay her eggs. So this could also be like a rodent's nest. If you watch, I forget which nature documentary it is, but the queen bee can literally fight like a mouse for her nest space. Like this queen is determined.
Hmm.
She wants somewhere to lay her eggs that's safe and secluded. So she lays those first round of eggs. Those are all going to be girls. Those are all female eggs.
Hmm.
Uh, so in general, the bumblebees, I will just tell you now, the girls do all the work. So all the fertilized eggs are going to be girls, and they're the
Okay.
ones who are caring for the queen, cleaning up the egg cells and taking care of the brood, going out to forage, doing the pollination that we see. So anytime you see a bumblebee pollinating, that's going to be a girl. Um, so they do that all throughout the summer. The queen bee kind of just lays back after she's raised that initial brood. She stays in the nest. The girls go out and collect pollen, bring it back, clean up the nest. They feed her like her own special cocktail of pollen and nectar called it's called royal jelly. I forgot to mention as well, the queen's saliva is super important to taking care of the nest at the beginning as well. So it's this special mix of like all these
Yeah.
things that are very yummy to bumblebees. Like go on, and the boys only come in later towards the end of the summer. The queen then gives birth to unfertilized eggs, which are the males, and their only job is to go out to this landing platform where the drones all gather and to find virgin queens and inseminate their their eggs for the next year. That's it.
Wow. That's
And then
it. And then they die, right? Yeah. I was gonna say, man, the male life of a bumblebee is not much happening there. I mean,
not much happening.
so the society of bees is like a functioning society of bees is primarily female then on a regular basis.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. It's primarily female.
Wow, I had no clue. I thought there was like male and female bees operating. It's like a female society. It's
It really is. Yeah. Honeybees are a little bit different in
uh-huh.
their a distribution of responsibilities. I think in honeybees, there's some that clean the nest, some that forage. The distribution is a bit more distinct. But for bumblebees, they all end up going through the process of doing all of these stages throughout their lives. And I think this is just controlled, as far as I'm aware, by the chemical signaling of the
Hmm.
queen and the other bees.
Interesting. So among this female society, what's is there a structure, kind of like a system of jobs or like behavior?
That's the thing. In the jobs are sort of they seem to be communicated from the queen to the colony. Like what job needs to be done seems to just be communicated through chemical signals.
Hmm.
So right now we need to go forage. Right now you need to prepare all the egg cells for eggs to be laid inside them. Right now you need to take care of the larvae. All of that is sort of communicated, I think, just through pheromones.
Hmm. Very interesting. And now so beyond the hibernation, is there like a bumblebee hive? Like, and how was that constructed?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, so the hive can be in a lot of places that already exist, like little burrows, little cavities that are found. There are some bumblebees that like nest in trees, but most of them nest underground or right on the surface. You've probably seen like paper wasp nests. They're very
Mm-hmm.
conspicuous, hanging off of trees. Bumblebees typically won't do it that obviously. It won't be like that big like hanging structure constructed. They'll just use an existing cavity somewhere.
Huh. And what's the queen's lifespan?
It's just a year. They all live just a year. So the
Hmm.
queen in the spring, she's come out, she's laid her fertilized eggs, she's taken the colony successfully through the whole summer. By the end of the summer, she'll die or just maybe, wander off and disappear at some points. And the virgin queens that were just born that summer, they're the ones that now their eggs get fertilized and they will go to sleep and wake up the next spring. So all of them just
Hmm.
live one season.
Wow. All right, I have a deep question. I feel like this is a deeper question.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay. How do you think about that life cycle and kind of the almost mechanized fashion of it? Like the bees I feel like they know. Bumblebees seem like they know this is their amount of time versus how we look at our lifespan and always trying to extend it beyond what it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so how much to the degree to which they have like their consciousness, I don't
Mhm.
know. I wish I could ask, but one thing I do know is small insects like bumblebees, they're sometimes called bioindicators, which means that if something's wrong with the bees, if they're disappearing, that's a good sign to us that something in the environment is changing, maybe deteriorating, and then we have to start taking a closer look at the environmental
Mhm.
conditions in which they live. So they're indicators. It's because they're so sensitive to the environment, first of all, because they forage directly on the primary producers, the plants, right? So if anything goes wrong with the plants, they're the first to notice. They're really small, so they're sensitive to environmental changes. Whereas I guess humans, we're not that sensitive to the environment. We've sort of built our own houses.
Clearly.
Yeah, like I mean, we are as a species, we're very fragile, but individually, I guess we can, sort of ignore nature sometimes, probably for the worse.
Yeah.
We're not as in tune with the environment around us, but bumblebees are one of the first to notice if something's going wrong. So we really need to pay attention to what's going on with the insects.
I feel like animals in general have a pretty good sense of nature. And I mean, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like they're trying to like extend their lifespan. Like they're just existing and they're doing these functions. And I don't know, I mean, maybe there's a certain level of consciousness that they're worried about dying. I don't know. But like I think it makes humans different is like we almost like try to buck society, like nature. Or like, well, we're almost like we're better than it. Like we don't exist in it. We're like, well, we shouldn't be dying. Like, why is that happening? Like feels like animals don't sense that. Or maybe they do, but they just allow the cycle to happen.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I guess um, there's evolution that'll happen, but not
Yeah.
within the individual lifespan of an insect or any animal. They just have their needs. They need their shelter, they need their food, they need environmental conditions that are suitable to them. And that's all they know. They,
Yeah.
can't go out and buy a fur coat or
No.
install a fan for the summer if it gets too hot. They're really at the mercy of what's out there already.
Yeah, it's true. So
Yeah.
this is a good bridge into environmentalism and like climate change. So obviously, working in this population, you're making the link between this. Why? First question is, why is this something is not a widely held thing about how our environment, our footprint on the environment and the effect it has on things as small as bumblebees? You think?
Why aren't we talking about it? Is
Like
that what
I don't know many people having this conversation today.
fair?
Seriously, you know.
Wow, that's yeah, we should be talking about it more. Because there's absolutely an urgency to talk about this. So in the past 10 years, 9 of those had been some of the hottest summers on record. Um, The planet is going through an unprecedented species loss. We've lost a quarter of all the bees that we've ever documented. So imagine how many more species might be lost that we've just never heard of.
Hmm.
The extinction rates are going up much faster than they have been at any other documented time. And for us, that also leads to the climate changes, I mean, are leading to natural disasters. Like everybody's heard in the news. There's floods, there's wildfires, there's unseasonable temperatures happening everywhere, which is leading to, like issues for us today. This is the loss of species is just cascading into um I mean, well, it's the loss of species is, something that you can sort of put out of your mind, but these
Hmm.
kind of natural disasters, you can't ignore that. And human mortality is going to increase as these environmental things start to show up more and more in our own lives.
Why don't, I think about like sometimes I've had a wildlife biologist on here, and I think we talked about the pros and cons of zoos and stuff, and whether people get to actually see an elephant up close or they see a lion, whatever, and they have usually it affects people much closer when they see the animal or the species that is being harmed. People see bumblebees a lot. Is there, like, but why? So why don't we care as much about bumblebees as we do about other species?
I would argue that if we paid attention to them for real, we would. And we do care more about bumblebees than about any other type of wild bee. There's so many species of wild bee out there. And part of the reason why I'm studying bumblebees specifically is just because people notice them, because they're big
Yeah,
and fluffy and cute. They're sort of more, they've got bit more charisma than a lot of other wild bees that are just the size of like a tiny fruit
yeah,
fly at times, and just harder to catch and just not as cute. So I would argue that like people are paying attention to bumblebees more than others, but there's definitely things we can do to make people pay attention to it more. What your daughter is doing, just going out and looking at insects in the natural world, is one of the best things we can do. I think a lot of people are leaving these big environmental problems up to like policymakers and big
hmm,
organizations, and sort of, you know, yeah, they do have a huge role to play in changing, regulations and policies that can govern our whole world and sort of affect with our fate. But you and I can do so much just at home. Teachers, parents, all of us can. There's so much that we can do to play our part to help.
but it's funny. I feel like if I like, I'm going to tell people about this conversation, right? I'm going to spread it out there online. I'm going to talk to people in person, and some people I know they're not going to take it that serious. They're not going to be like, okay, bumblebees are gone. Okay, like why won't people take stuff like that seriously?
I mean, that's a huge question. Because they don't care. Like, if someone had a pet bumblebee and it died, they would probably care. But
Yeah,
it's the apathy, I think. It goes back to what you asked me earlier, not feeling connected with the natural world as much. You just
yeah,
You're distracted by other things. Um, if and kids are born with this natural sense of wonder and excitement
yes,
about the natural world. That's there right away. If we can just, as educators and parents, remind students, like draw their attention back to that, remind them that even in cities, there's just so much like diversity of life. And every time you walk by a flower, check out to see what's on it, or check out what that flower is called. Um, they'll grow up with that sense of like, okay, this is part of my environment, this is important to me. And whatever job they go into, they might keep that in mind. If you're an
yeah.
insurance broker, you'll do insurance based on environmental catastrophes. If you're a scientist, you can study conservation. um, it's just up to us to like get that curiosity back, and I really
Yeah.
think it has to start with the younger generations.
So let's talk about, you mentioned a few of these things already, but like, I think it's good for people to take, what I want this to be something is people listen to this go, wow, first of all, I didn't know anything about bumblebees. Two, like, it's a detriment if these animals are not, these insects are not around, what are the consequences of not having bumblebees in our society? Like, and how would people feel that?
Right. All right. So, if you like denim, if you like wearing jeans or having cotton things, forget it. We're not going to have that without pollinators. Some plants are wind pollinated, but most of them need pollinators like bees.
Hmm.
So forget that. Dairy, you can forget having any dairy. The majority of,
Really?
well, because what cows eat is plants that are pollinated by bees. There's no way around that. Um, yeah. I've even heard that some weeds, like the invasive garlic mustard, if it grows on pastures that cows graze on, it changes the taste of the milk. The milk
Mm.
becomes sort of more garlicky. So
Oh.
basically, we don't want to mess with that. Let's protect the natural flowers, and then we'll just have the milk that we're used to. Yeah, and I mean that's to say nothing of like of all the fruit and veg crops that we have, and some fruit and vegetable crops are much more efficiently pollinated specifically by bumblebees because they have this cool behavior where they can buzz. It's called buzz pollination. They vibrate their bodies to kind of weasel into those flowers of berries, for example, and get in there and like pollinate that plant better than anything else. So I mean, imagine not having the fruit and vegetables we have and the other food that we have and the clothing that we have. And just, I mean, from a completely, even if you're entirely, heartless and unbothered by these things, imagine how economically, like how expensive it's going to be to mechanically pollinate these things.
Hmm.
The cost of any of nature around us, like the air filtration that trees do for us, there's a massive economic, like tangible cost that you can, tangible benefit. Like it would cost so much for us to like filter the air the way that trees do, and similarly, it would cost so much for us to try to pollinate flowers, reproduce them in the way that bees already naturally do.
Is there efforts to do that? Are people scientists trying to do that?
In some places, it's kind of already inevitable. People have to literally walk around with a little paintbrush through their apple orchard and move the pollen between plants,
Oh
which
my
is,
gosh.
if you can imagine, I mean, wildly inefficient compared to letting insects just do their thing. Yeah.
Wow, I
Um,
did not know that. That's intense. Like
we don't want to live in a future with drone bees either. I mean, that's just,
drone bees? What's that?
I think, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I've seen some research into how to make little drone versions of the insects that we have. But I mean,
Wow.
isn't that depressing?
I feel like that's really depressing. Like you're just gonna have these fake bees just rolling around and just doing some weird version of pollination. Like,
I think so too.
what is that? Like,
No. What do you have? What are you gonna have to do? Like battery charge
I
them?
know, how does that work? Like, don't
I
you
don't.
feel we do that though? Like humans do that. Like instead of actually solving a problem, we just like, well, let's just like let's make up something to account. You know what I mean? Instead of like helping bumblebees, we go, we just replace them. You know, like we'll make them
Yeah,
like nano bees or something. You know, it's like,
absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. In the long term, it is much more economical to just preserve our natural habitat. But that's one of the issues with it is sometimes in the short term, these biodiversity conservation programs don't always seem to be, where people think the money needs to be going right now. So
yeah,
they don't always get the support that they need.
interesting. So yeah, talk about that a little bit about emphasis on this area of conservation? Like, is there levels of importance that you've seen for this? Like, oh, okay, these mammals or these insects, like, hey, bumblebees down here, whatever mammals up here.
Um, yeah, I think if you look at, for example, the World Wildlife Fund, you'll see the super charismatic mammals right on the front page of their
Yeah.
website. Yeah, but it's like you said before, it's much easier to convince people to protect things that are really cute. Um, yeah, and there's so many insects and animals that we just don't know that much about. And part of the reason is their study isn't funded because they're not adorable.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah, if you look at the IUCN reports in the States, they will report on a majority of species what their status is, if they're extinct or vulnerable to extinction or of least concern. Um, and scientists will routinely study more things, like try to get more information about species that they think might be endangered so that they can submit their profiles to this report so that we can have it documented that these species were documented to be at risk, in this year.
Hmm.
But for example, for bumblebees, that it can be a problem even putting them on lists like that because we don't know some things about them that we need to know to be able to list them. For example, we don't know where they overwinter, so we can't write conclusively that their overwintering habitat is, being endangered or being lost due to like land use changes.
Right. See, that was like my original thing was like, well, where does this happen? Like, first of
Exactly.
all, who knows this is happening and where does it happen? You know?
Definitely. We need more young researchers out there looking for all this stuff. And actually, it doesn't have to just be me looking at all this stuff and doing a graduate degree. Anybody can do this, can look out into the natural world. And actually, community science or citizen science, as it used to be called, where anybody can just go document what's happening in the world around them and report it on like public apps, that is actually such a massive source of information for scientists. For example, iNaturalist is this huge app where you can take a picture of any natural thing you see in the wild, any single like weird insect that you find or
Yeah.
flower, or if you see a turtle and you want to know what is that turtle called, you upload it and it tags the latitude and longitude of where you found it. It says when you found it, and now anybody in the world can go see, oh, okay, in this place there's been, this species has been documented. And if you can imagine that if everyone just on their daily lives, on their daily walks, like me on my daily lockdown walks, I'll do this often. Just take a picture of something I think is cool or something I want to know more about, put it up on the app, and then to scientists, this amalgamates into an enormous body of data where we now know, okay, the range of this species is, within these bounds, and we know that. We know it's gotten all the way to this corner of North America because someone's seen it over there and they have photo proof
Yeah.
of it. So anybody can download these apps and help out and learn a bit more about their natural world too.
That's pretty iNaturalist. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to tell my daughter about that and my wife. They're huge outside
Oh
nature
yeah.
people. I mean, like so sensitive to animals of all tininess, huge, and it's really amazing. What role do you think? Well, let me rephrase this. I talk to a lot of scientists on my show these days. I just think scientists need to get out and do more stuff like this, like what we're doing. Because I think in the past, like I grew up in the 80s, the 90s, I was in college in the 90s, and your typical scientist kind of, one, this wasn't around, but I think sometimes it's getting easy for scientists to just stay in the laboratory or in the field and you're publishing work. But that work does not get to everyday people enough for them to care about it and to want to do something. And how science is presented to people, I think, is particularly important. So, how do you view your role in that?
I think you're absolutely right. There's that disconnect between everybody and the science that we're doing allegedly to, for everybody, but people don't see the link. I think my role is definitely to be able to convey that research in a way that people feel like this is research that's done for them, that they can contribute to, that they can benefit from in their natural world in their daily lives, and hopefully that increases their trust and curiosity for science. Um, my role personally during my degree has been to try to do science outreach, for example, to schools. I do a lot of things with, I love going to classrooms with Let's Talk Science, Skype a Scientist, Letters to a Pre-Scientist. Massive shout out to those programs. They're
Yeah.
all nonprofits, grassroots programs that just let people like me talk to like classrooms all over the world, and let them know this is what I do and I'm a normal person too. I
Yeah,
think that that's a big thing. I'm
big
just like,
time.
yeah, yes, I have the same hobbies as these kids do, and but I also just like to do research, and I don't have to be. I never wear a lab coat. I'll be honest, never.
No. I think the look of scientists to me is changing. And I think we've had this predetermined look of what a scientist looked like. Primarily in the past, it was a guy, always a guy, which is not good. And it was always some person, this guy in like a pocket protector, this like old school smoking jacket looking thing on teaching, and just kind of like not in touch with, like, socially awkward, not in touch with how people live normal, hold up in a laboratory. I think that actually hurts scientists. It hurts science because you're dealing with just academia and the pursuit of tenure and the pursuit of pumping out research. Well, what's the point of having this research if most people in the world don't even look at it except your colleagues? I think it's a huge flaw of science, but I think it's changing actually.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. People feel like scientists are out of touch, and so when research comes out, they're reluctant to believe it, which is the saddest part because it's
Yeah.
an extremely rigorous research process, and to have it such a minimal impact sometimes, that definitely needs to change. Yeah, it's and you mentioned that it's normally like guys, right? That
It's not
that are
good.
the science. Yeah, I it's hard to stay apathetic to that when you're in the lab, when you're in research and you see that attitude of students around me or younger students, considering whether they should pursue graduate studies, and they just don't feel represented
Yeah.
by their faculty, by the speakers that come to our seminars. They don't feel like they belong, and that's a massive, massive roadblock to um, research at all, because if people leave, their ideas go with them and
Yeah.
you get to hear what they have to say. So definitely I think it's my role to sort of look back and help out other students coming up who want to do this, and to make them feel belonged and like they should have respect, and inclusion without request in their laboratories, which is much easier said than done.
Yeah. You know what I find I tend to like make these comparisons, analogies of things, and we talked about, like, the cuddly looking animals. Like, dogs are amazing because they've ingratiated themselves in society. And scientifically, we know this, just the look of a dog, the puppy dog eyes, it makes people want to embrace dogs and make it a large thing that people are like care more about than children sometimes, you know, and because dogs feel almost relatable to the human experience. And I think that's the same thing as scientists, is like there has to be a relatability, right? If a scientist is only into science, that's their only work. All you scientists out there are like, you have to be relatable to people, like everyday people. Like, you have to show that there's more to you than just research and the things that you're like. You just need to be like a regular person. Do you go out to eat? Do you dine? Do you like to go travel? Like, what is it? Like the whole person. I think sometimes in any work we do, I'm in the fitness business. I never like when my colleagues are only into fitness. Like, so, okay, all you care about is the aesthetic and the physical stuff. Like, what about other stuff? What's about your spirituality? What about your environment? Do you care about the environment? Like, and I think for science is like, we need to see the whole scientist, not just the science that you publish. Like, who are you actually? You know?
Absolutely, yeah, I'd 100% agree with that. It's hard because there's no um, direct, sometimes that's not rewarded within the science community. I feel like, you do it because you personally care, but it's not the same as putting a paper down on your resume. But I
Yeah.
totally agree. We need to do a better job of including everybody in the field. Everybody belongs here. Everybody can do their part, and we really are just people.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of professions are like this. It's a messaging and image issue. It's like you got tied down into this monoculture, male dominated deal. and you don't have diversity within the whole deal. And the presentation of science often in school is extremely boring. It's like, and it's science for the purpose of passing a test. It's the same thing with math. Math is boring. You know why? Because the way it's presented is extremely boring. It's not fun. It's most of the stuff you're into is all about how it was presented to you. I'm presenting bees as this amazing thing to my daughter. We're watching it, we're taking pictures of a bee pollinating a flower. That presentation is going to change how she sees bees for it. All about the presentation or things, you know.
Absolutely. I've been lucky to have a few science teachers that have definitely just inspired me massively. So I can't say I always thought it was boring in school. I thought it was pretty cool.
But that's probably rare what you experience, you
Yeah,
know, like
definitely. You need to feel connected to it. You need to have someone be passionate about it to make you want to do it. You're totally right. We need
yeah,
we need a marketing revamp. Um,
completely.
I think that'll come when more people from more backgrounds are able to feel welcome in science. That'll come on its own.
Most definitely. I just had a couple of ladies on. They do a podcast, Science with Millennials. It's really cool. And they just started out, and they did radiation, they did fire. And what's cool about them, they both have purple hair. And I said, that's good. I said, you have to be yourself. Don't be what society thinks you should be, or science is telling you need to be this buttoned up person. I was like, you need to flex your artistic ability. That doesn't take away from your intelligence about the subject. And if somebody thinks they do, that's about them, not about you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I listened to that episode as well. I thought that was so cool that she was also like, yeah, I don't wear lab coats. I'm not like this old guy.
You know,
I'm myself.
we got to
Yeah.
break that stuff. I really think, I'm not saying it's like the worst thing or anything, but just like it's representative of an era that was fine. It has to move on. We have to progress. I want my scientists to look very different. I want them to be like the version they want to be. I'm sure there's plenty of scientists back in the day who wanted to like have like a mohawk or something, but they just thought, well, I'm not gonna get to this level because they're gonna see me this way. And I think that's wrong. You should be able to present. That doesn't make you unintelligent. It just means you like a mohawk. What is it? Who cares? Like,
Absolutely.
right? I
Yeah,
mean, you like playing Dungeons and Dragons? I don't care. Like, can you do the work? Can you do the work? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, I do. I also play music. I teach
yeah,
music. I love snowboarding. I
amazing.
things that everybody likes to do.
Of course, because you're not just like this one trick pony. I mean, it's like, but what you're doing is really important. But I don't know. I just like talking to scientists about this stuff. I'm like, you got a messaging problem, man. You got an image problem. Like, but it's not just but the more Olgas out there, the more Rachel and Cody's out there, the better it is for scientists. The better it is. So I want to promote people like you. That's what I want to do. You know?
Yeah, that'd be great. It's definitely a challenge sometimes to get everybody on the same level, get everybody that same, make everyone feel welcome enough that they, first of all, get to the graduate level.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot more women, for example, in undergraduate than there are at the graduate level, and then
Mm-hmm.
way, way more at the graduate level than they are in faculty. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a challenge to retain talent from all backgrounds, let alone make them feel that they can express their own uniqueness too.
Yeah. I think you're in a good time, Olga, with
I'm
all this. And I just put out like a solo cast as well, and it's called The Future is Feminine. And
mm,
I actually really believe that. I really believe it. And not in some way of like, oh, this, I think it's a wonderful thing. Feminine energy, I think the future. And we know that through research, whenever we empower and lift up femininity or women, society gets better. It gets dramatically better. When we lift up people of different ethnicities and we give them opportunities, it actually creates less violence and more prosperity for the planet. We know this information. We should be raising up women and people of color constantly.
I mean, anybody who just wants to look at the facts, as like scientists who want to see the facts and the numbers behind EDI initiatives in institutions, just need to look at the research outcomes of more diverse labs. They really do produce higher quality research. It really is a benefit to the bottom line to include as many perspectives as you can, different backgrounds.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it really is important. Right now, I'm running this equity committee in my department. So we started about a year ago. I'm the chair and founder, and I'm hoping to pass it off to another student. And one of the biggest things I learned is just people want to talk about this. Young people want to talk about this. They just feel alone in this sometimes. And you just need to start the conversation, and people will come out there. They'll reach out to you. They'll won't feel as alone anymore. We just need to keep talking about it.
Well, I'm definitely interested in talking about it, and I'm working on some stuff that I think is going to elevate
All
uh,
right.
this the kind of the feminine energy for the, because I want to be a part of it. I want to be a positive contributor to it, because I don't look at that energy being primarily like a woman based thing. I think feminine energy can consist in men as well, than any gender. It's just how we are presenting that energy. We have presented it poorly in men forever to basically not exhibit that energy, which is so wrong. And so I want to change that.
Well, think about the qualities that we associate with leadership. These are not my ideas. I've heard these from numerous
Mm-hmm.
like TED Talks and articles, but one of the prevalent ideas for why women are sometimes excluded from like top C-level roles is that, you know, the qualities we associate with leadership are always often the qualities that we encourage in young boys
Mm-hmm.
and not young women. And the
Right.
language, therefore, that we put into job ads is seems to be more masculine.
Mm-hmm.
You can even quantify like certain verbs, certain words, terms that you use to describe the job as feminine or masculine. And
Yep.
studies show that women are just discouraged from applying when these words just don't feel like anything anyone's ever said to them before. No one's ever said that they're a strong leader, that they're confident or assertive, maybe, and so
Yeah.
they disqualify themselves and they get disqualified.
Think about if you saw a job ad that said, we're looking for a caring, nurturing, humble, strong, whatever. You know, you start, that sounds to me more universally human than it sounds either one way or the other. It sounds it sounds like delightful. You know, like we're looking for somebody who's strong but sensitive, who's caring and has humility versus, you know,
Yeah, but right now we associate that vulnerability with a weakness
right.
and
We got to flip that.
yeah,
We're going to
absolutely.
flip it. We're going to flip it.
Yeah, it's a tough question, like what you can do in your own business to change that, to not perpetuate the negative stereotypes that you might unbiased unconsciously be biased
Yeah,
toward. Yeah, there's a lot to look into that, but it's definitely important.
most definitely. Olga, I knew this was going to be good, and it definitely was. It was amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
So nice to speak to you. Yeah, definitely get that app and let me know how many species you find. And
iNaturalist, for
that's it. Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we will definitely be in touch.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Take
Olga.
care. Bye.